Hello, everybody. I am here finally. Took a minute. How's everybody doing tonight? We got Ghost, we got Paul, we got Colton, we got Ratbat. We've got a few people, all right. I know that it's up on the screen right now. Just try to wait until I'm reading. If you're gonna read along, try to wait till I'm uh okay. And we got Oh, we got Daniel. Okay, what's up, Daniel? Uh-oh, Daniel says he can't hear me. All right. Okay, everyone said yeah, before I start, I need to make sure that the volume's good, that everything is Oh, we got Dan enter the peak fly. All right. Paul says he can hear me just fine. Okay. Well, without further ado, what I want to do for this reading is we can take questions here right here in the beginning, but I'm going to keep it pretty low, pretty minimal. I'm going to do the reading uninterrupted, so I'm not going to stop during the reading. And then at the end, if anyone's got any, pressing questions at the ending, that's when we can go crazy with it. But I just want to get everybody squared away before we go. Colton, I hope you are awake enough to. Because if you go to sleep after the beginning of the story, that's one hell of a part of the story you're going to get before you go to sleep. So, my inspiration for the story is was that partly from a Cormac McCarthy book, and it's called Child of God. And some of the inspiration just kind of has to do with unchecked cruelty, kind of roaming America. But I don't want to say too much without giving stuff away because that's kind of the essence of the story. Uh, Where am I from? I am from New Orleans. Okay, so without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and start the reading. This does have graphic content, so there will be a content warning in the beginning if anyone's squeamish or anything about anything. All right, here we go. Storm of God by S.M. Pike. Content warning, kidnapping, and domestic violence. Clouds like giant rolling snakes stretched as far as the eye could see over those endless Texas hills. Outside the window of the maze roamer, a storm was on the way. Whistling winds, loud in gusts like a boat at stormy sea. He guided the head full of long black hair up and down in his lap, pulling up, letting down, pulling up, down, up, down, up, down. And again, for maybe the 100th time, he gazed up out the window of the mobile home at the passing clouds and wondered if anyone was really, truly watching. The thought brought a strange warmth, a piercing warmth, as it almost always did, and the bobbing head led up again, more so than he wanted. Grab the thighs, damn it. Her silicon, partially robotic hands were pressed down on his bare thighs, just as he had placed them there, artificially resisting, just as he had told her, or tried to tell her. He yanked up the head by the hair to see its dumb silicon face, his cock plopping out its gaped mouth. Rubbery, silicony, bouncy, wet. God damn it, what don't you get about grab thighs and resist? He waited for a response, his erection standing between them and not going away. He yanked her hair again, violently, and the thing finally said in its flat, hollow voice, "I'm sorry." He was getting fed up with the damn thing. He tossed the dead weight of the Angelica bot to the side, and it slunk lazily against the end table in only a tiny miniskirt, her small breasts rubbery and perky, her thin arms slouched at her sides. After a moment, she turned her head with no expression on her face and said in her robotic voice, "I'm sorry. I don't understand your desire." Yeah, no shit. And as the silicon robot awkwardly shifted to stand, Guy Douglas leaned and got the tiny hand remote and pushed the observe/auto button. Nothing happened. He remembered with some annoyance and pointed it at her. Tedious having to actually aim the damn thing at the sex bot in order for it to catch. All that complexity into a machine that could supposedly think and solve simple problems, and still you have to point the remote directly at it. And with the push of a button, she immediately slunk back against the end table, robotic and heavy. Stay. Observe being the first setting, she only lay there dumbly between the end table and the bed, doing just that, observing, learning the most basic of the surrounding motions and sounds. And as Guy stood getting his windbreaker back on and getting ready to step out, the bot turned her head to look at him. She held that gaze, and Guy could tell that meant she might have been trying to speak. He pointed and clicked auto/observe. "Are you still going to travel to your former companion's place of residency?" He exhaled. Don't ask stupid questions. He tossed the remote back on the bed, chugged a half-empty water bottle from the bar, then casually made his way over to the back door and out of the rolling domicile. The wind trying to close the door behind him. The Angelica bot watched as he stretched out there in the violent winds. To Guy, it all felt heavenly all over him, like being on top of the world there on that hill. And he took in a deep breath and then let it out. He looked skyward at the rushing grays and whites. "After you," he said to nothing with a grin on his face. And with that, he turned and went back, hands in windbreaker, to the long, tin-wheeled silver and black maze roamer. Then he heard something, a snapping. He turned and looked down the hill, in the trees. Did something just happen? Did a tree just fall? He couldn't tell. He looked back up at the sky with the smallest tinge of something. Perhaps uncertainty, nervousness. He forced a smile and continued back to the roamer. Rain and forest blurred by. Guy steered on, the Angelica bot also looking onward, now in her white tank top. Guy was pondering something for a good few seconds, then said, "Gotta teach you how to resist." Slowly her head rotated. A pause between them. Then the robotic voice. "Resist? Yeah, seems like you don't know the meaning." Another pause. Do you mean during pleasure? Uh-huh. Your request seems contradict. Shut up. He looked over at her, annoyed, then back on the road. He exhaled. Rubbed my arm. Arm on the armrest. I must be in basic command mode or auto mode to comply. He reached and got the remote and pushed the button. He set his arm down again. She began to rub. Doesn't matter if the request seems contradictory. It's what I said to do. You know how to do it or not? Another pause. She sat looking into the dark space between them. Blank. Then she finally looked at him and answered. Why are we going to your former companion's place of residency? He inhaled slowly, a familiar irritation. He let it out, shaking his head. His eyes leered over at her like sharp little needles. He looked back onward. Ex-girlfriend. I'm sorry? Marcia's an ex-girlfriend, not companion. That ain't what they're called. They don't mean the same thing? No. I'm sorry. I suppose I don't understand. More silence. Without looking at her, arm off. And she did. And he reached and got the remote, pushed observe, put it down, and steered on. Glancing back over at her at the shadow of the front cab, he wondered at her silent, examining portrait, about her programming, the way she thought. Wondered if he'd possibly knocked her wires a bit too loose. He looked back out ahead. Gotta get you to stop asking stupid questions. She looked over. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, stayed like that for a while, and very plainly she said, yes, and then faced outward into the storm. Another starless night. He wandered the darkness, and the light of the maze roamer window was far off. He heard something again, just like the night before. He moved in the breeze, silver glint of the gun in his hand, 1911 Colt pistol. The trees looked funny too. The shadows were too tall, too dark, like they were looking at him. And he looked up through the swaying trees at a patch of rolling sky. He looked over at the distant yellow light of the roamer, back up at the sky, then down at his phone, finger hovering over Marcia. He looked back over at the trees. Somewhere back there, in the dark. Did he hear something? Another snapping sound? He couldn't tell over the breeze. He didn't like the way the trees looked. Dull morning gloom. The silver and black maze roamer was a rolling anomaly. He dialed Marcia again, the phone icon sharing the GPS screen in the front console. It rang, and then it stopped. The Angelica bot watched the screen with a dull, odd look about her, and eventually she slowly looked over at Guy. He looked angry driving onward. She asked, May I ask something? Without looking over, he said, What? Why do you keep attempting to call your former companion? You say former companion one more time, I'll rip your throat out. Silence. She sat blankly, may have been considering something, then said, Ex-girlfriend. Guy looked at her slowly. She was looking back. He was surprised to a certain extent, pondered something briefly, then looked back ahead. Don't worry about it. They were there. The old apartment complex sat low out there across the field. They were holed up a dozen or so yards back in the tree line where things were hard to see. Guy sat there in the shadow, staring, his chest rising and falling under the growl of thunder. Angelica was also looking onward, her head turned to say something. Are you going to invite her to join us? He didn't answer, but instead got up and went back to the bed as Angelica's robotic gaze stayed on him. And he reached down and brought back up a black outdoor bag, tossed it onto the bed, and then started sifting up above through the overhead cabinets. Angelica observed with no expression. He brought down looped rope, duct tape, blunt handle of a sheathed something, other things, tossed it all in the bag. Then, black rubber cleaning gloves. And he reached into the glove box in front of Angelica, pulled out the silver Colt pistol, then went back to the bed. He stood there, feeling the weight of it in his hand, Angelica still observing. He slid out the magazine, fully loaded, pulled back the barrel so the bullet popped out, and then set all the ammo on the bed. Slowly, he began to settle into a sort of easygoing stance, readying himself when he lashed around and aimed the gun directly at the mirror behind him. He aimed it straight at his own reflection, looking himself dead in the eye. And it felt a strange moment just then, a sort of sinking feeling, one of eerie, perhaps bitter uncertainty. And that sinking feeling began to roll into an odd loneliness, sinking, uncertain, bitter, sinking, uncertain, bitter, alone. Click. Empty. Aimed directly at the center of his forehead. Angelica broke the silence. That is protection? A pause. He blinked and broke from his own dark trance. Yep. He turned back around, slid the magazine back in, and rechambered the bullet. He put the .45 into the holster that hung discreetly in his windbreaker, reached for the counter, took a swig of Kentucky whiskey, and went to the front console screen. Angelica observed as Guy stood over her, readying the icons on the screen. Remember how I showed you to use this? She stared at him. To call for help, He stopped himself, annoyed. This was the dozenth time or so that he'd had to describe the word help to her, insisting she use the word constantly during their acts of pleasure, trying to make her yell, no, scream it, but her robotic limits not understanding the command. What's really happening? You press this button if you see anyone. And I mean anyone. Do you understand? She stared at the screen for a good moment, and then looked back up at him. Yes. He too stared back, exhaled deep and long, not so assured. He moved back to the side door and grabbed the bag and slung it over his shoulder. He stood there under the light. And then, very slowly, he took out a dark object. A cheap hockey mask, spray-painted black. He slipped the string over the back of his head. He loved the look of riot gear. He inhaled deeply, ritualistically. Exhaled. And with that, he took out the remote, aimed it at Angelica like target practice, and pressed observe. She sat there silent, and Guy opened the door and disappeared into the woods. The concrete road that led to the apartments was patchy and desert-like under the overcast, and he had moved slowly. The image came to him of being a masked phantom approaching some strange, hollow place in time. But then something gave way and snapped. It was far off. He stopped in his tracks, looked around. Then there came a very faint, very distant, and very, very heavy thud. Like something giant had struck the earth far back there in the trees. Only he couldn't tell where it came from, or in fact, if it was, or if it in fact was a thud. Maybe it was thunder. Wouldn't be the first time he'd mismatched the signs, he thought, while looking up at the white sky. He grinned under the mask and kept moving. The apartments were small and old, and created the illusion of a greater structure, sitting low with time and misuse. Old, wilted, and half-green plants lined the outer edges of the buildings. Carefully, he approached the high brick border that encircled the main entrance. The gate was open. He moved cautiously with the bag under his shoulder, and he saw no one, trying his best not to spend too much time out in the open, not to appear as the lurking figure he was. And through the main gate was darkness. Vines grown over steel and brick, an industrial cave mouth. He moved slowly through the corridor, through shadowed segments of interconnecting apartment walkways, and his path seemed to lead into total darkness. He noticed how quiet it was, even in the pushes of wind. Dead leaves that had made their way about the place. His eyes were adjusting, the overcast from the outer world glimmering in places. He moved through the fear, coldly, wide-eyed. And he became again the lurking masked figure, now slowly entering the near total dark before him, the brick and steel maw. And he found himself along the wall where he could feel and barely see the hard, heavy edges of rusted pipes. Moving further, deeper into the shadow, it felt oddly as though light had been banished from this place years ago. And then after a moment, a rather breathless one, hard angles at the edges of his vision were beginning to form. More pipes, rust, a door, concrete wall, pipes, another door. A glimmer of light shone down before him, the old corridor coming back to grim visibility, seeming to extend down a row of pipes and doors. He steadied himself more, forcing himself to focus. But there was something else here. Something strange. Something looking like he could feel its presence here somewhere, taking up some dark, unseen space up ahead. Then there was a thud. He slowed to a creep. The sound was faint but heavy, like some huge thing trying to shift its weight, and it was close. He focused in on moving forward, edging along the wall. Sneaky. Is something down there? In the corridor? Is that it? In the doorway up ahead, in Marcia's doorway? Something big, something dark, inching its way back inside the doorway as though to stay somewhat hidden. He stood there, a mask with big, wide eyes, gun barely drawn out in front of him. He forced himself to move forward. The thing in the doorway, he needed to see what it was, what it is, what it could be. But he couldn't see it now. He came to the door. It was still cracked open. And then, for some unknown, unforeseen, utterly idiotic and utterly terrible reason, he stepped forward. Slowly, and with the barrel of his pistol, he pushed the door open. Whatever the thing was, whatever it was doing in his ex-girlfriend's apartment out here while no one was watching, it was not here. Nothing was. He slowly began to realize his surroundings, or total lack thereof. Nothing, absolutely nothing was here but dust and shadow. It had been stripped long ago, and was now barren to the point of being alien. He was frozen, staring, just inside the doorway, unsure of what to do next. Then slowly, and with great uncertainty, he began to back away. A coolness from the outer walkway came in. Felt odd, dark. He decided he should leave. He didn't want to know what it was. Now more than ever, he was lost out here. Driving, driving, driving. Hills and rocks and hills and rocks and rolling gray skies. Trees off in the distance. And then, a small dirt road. Angelica slunk there and watched as he drove. As he slowed the roamer, he took a turn onto the small dirt road. Her head rotated over to him, maybe to say something, but didn't. He drove on. The dirt road was long. Boulders and hills turned to trees and hills, then just trees. They were surrounded by swaying giants. The maze roamer came to a creeping halt on a high piece of forest, and before them, the view descended down into a low region of woods that held something of a picturesque sight, a small, lonely house. Down there it looked almost like a cabin, single story and made of wood, a haven beneath an everlasting storm. There was a small blue car sticking out from around the corner, and there wasn't much in the yard aside from a few unkept gardens and a little colorful flag flapping just off the porch. Then someone walked around from where the car was. A young, skinny-looking woman in sweatpants and a long sleeve. Her long, straight hair a mess in the wind. She made her way up and through the She made her way up and through the porch and disappeared through the front door. Is that your, eyes fluttering, ex-girlfriend? No. They were both watching. Interesting. He looked over at her. What is? Interesting how she fits your description of Marcia. She looked over at him. I sense distress. Shut up. And he pulled the lever back in reverse. Getting ready again, gloves and mask on. Remember how to call for help? Call for help? Exhaled, stupid robotic bitch. Just use the call pad if you see anyone. He pointed the remote and was gone. Angelica sat against the tiny rain droplets, that robotic gaze looking out into somewhere, watching the tall trees sway in the gentle storm, watching the light blankets of mist fall and glide like ghost curtains, watching Guy make his way back over the hill, carrying something, a couple dozen yards out, watching him move closer, hauling something heavy that's not his bag. Angelica could see it was the limp legs of the woman in the sweatpants. Angelica sat there as Guy moved past her. The roamer blazed onto the main road, spewing muck behind it, swaying a hard left and right, then straightened out. Guy's window was down and the breeze was wild up front. Angelica looked over at Guy, then back towards the bedding area. Again, could only see her sweatpants, white and pink socks, shoes on the floor. Then looked back at Guy, the wind whipping about them. Then something got his attention in the rear view. Fucking shit. He looked up at the mirror. Road. Mirror. Road. Fucking shit. A quick siren sounded. He started looking at both mirrors, looking around for a place to pull over. Slowing down, and he looked over at Angelica and said through his teeth, "Keep your fucking mouth shut, you hear me? Don't say anything about anything you saw. You got it?" She stared at him. They came to a stop. I sense distress. He looked defeated momentarily. Then his eyes sharpened again, like little needles, and said to her in a low voice, "Just keep your damn mouth shut." He breathed deep as he watched the cop in the rear view get out of his car. Deep, heavy breath. He saw the cop had his shades on, then a medium breath, watching him make his way along the RV. Then let the breath out. Then a low breath. Then normal breathing. And the cop was at his door. "How we doing today? You know why I pulled..." The officer froze at the sight of the silicon robot slunk in the passenger seat. He brought his finger up to lower his shades to get a better look. "Having a fun day out here, are we?" I He realized how lucky he was to have already taken the gloves and mask off. "Yeah." Handing him his license and registration all ready to go. The officer looked it all over atop his notepad and said, "Have any weapons on board?" He was dark around the eyes. "A Colt 45 pistol, unloaded." "Nice." The officer clicked his pen. "That all?" "Yes, sir." The officer kept writing. "You know why I pulled you over today, sir?" Next to Guy, the Angelica bot turned and looked at them. "Help." Then, very slowly, Guy turned and looked at her. The cop's gaze shifted to the sex bot, then over to Guy, then the bot again, and suddenly, he burst out laughing, dropping his pad and Guy's paper. He began laughing so hard that he had to hunch over to hold himself up. Guy looked at him, gave him a chuckle. The cop gathered up the papers, wiping the tears from under his shades. Just try to be more careful when getting back on the road next time. God damn." And handed it all back to Guy. He couldn't stop chuckling even as he returned to the squad car. And soon enough, he was gone, leaving Guy sitting there and slowly looking back over to Angelica. What the hell was that? Her expression was that of the wind, and after a long time of saying nothing, she turned and looked back outward. But Guy was still glaring at her, glared at her for a good minute or so, thinking what he could do to her. Then he looked back at the tied-up feet on the edge of the bed. He then turned and looked back out the window toward the sky, and it were as though the clouds themselves were growling something as they passed. So he listened, and it was like listening to a long, dead landscape insisting he go further in, further into the unknown he knew he was exploring, his vision narrowing, and he took a long, long, deep breath. He nodded in agreement with himself and put on a playlist. The Stones, Out of Time. Leagues of ancient trees, long, tall, intricate, interconnected, wilted, wilted for far too long, until finally some green, some orange and red, hills and trees slowly coming more and more to life. He heard a whimper from the back. He knew he was coming up on a good spot, too. He pulled off the main road, a spot where nobody seemed to even have old barbed wire up around their land. It was just God's hills, and that's exactly where he needed to be. Another dirt road. Heard her whimper harder. Looked up in the mirror and saw her feet thrash. There was a nice hill about half a mile up, a hill with a tree, so he began to idle, and soon he was pulling into the bushes and on to the elevation of the hill, and the whimpers were turning to cries, gagged, muffled cries. The hill was exquisite, the view exceptional, and there was only the one tree, slightly curved to the side. It had blossomed some type of beautiful flower, as well as grow voluptuous amounts of apples, many of which had fallen and had begun to rot. He inched the roamer to a halt a couple dozen yards from the tree, so that the beauty of the true tip-top of the hill lay between them. He put it in park and killed the engine, going to the back where Angelica couldn't see. She only sat there, looking out the window dumbly, as a hard thud turned the woman's cry to a whimper. Angelica observed the crooked tree through the droplets of rain, then saw a shirtless guy dragging the half-squirming naked woman out on the grass, rope dragging behind her from her wrists and ankles. And when they were out on the top of the hill, roughly halfway between the roamer and the tree, he kicked her with the toe of his boot right in the gut so she shouldn't move. Then took the rope that was tied to her wrist and brought it back up to the front of the roamer. A few more steps and he came in through the side door, his body and his jeans wet. "May I ask something?" Guy was halfway pulling his jeans down, caught dumbfounded by the question. Angelica turned her head halfway toward him, as though to wait for a response. Huh? May I?" A pause. A pretty long one. Uh-huh. Then Angelica did something she rarely ever did. She stood up. Something fully possible in observe/auto mode, but there was never any reason for her to do it automatically. But apparently now there was. Her limbs awkwardly brought her to her feet, and she was now facing Guy. He zipped his jeans back up, curious, trembling, unsure of himself. "What is it? Are you distressed?" He let out a cry, no, a whimper, something buried that wasn't a real response. "Because If you are, he looked at her dead in the eyes. Only now there were tears in his, perhaps genuine, and he was shaking. Then I can help. The sorrow, the pain in his face. It instantly went cold. The needles in his eyes were back. What the hell did you just say, bitch? No response. Instead, he lashed his fist out at her throat, then another hit to the face, then another to the body. An instant, violent mirage of blows being pounded into the corner by the end table. She fell like dead weight, her jaw, her arm, and her neck broken out of place. The mist fell upon Guy as he knelt securing the rope at the woman's ankles. She was half crying, half grunting through her gag. Guy had just finished tying the other rope around the base of the tree. You're about to be really beautiful, honey. Her wrists and ankles tied in opposite directions. She started thrashing and yelping and screaming and crying as loud and as hard as she could. It brought him only a smile as he looked down and watched. He looked up to see how clear the view was from the white sky. Just fine enough, he thought. And another thought came to him, that he too needed to be without clothes, as so his purity be equally seen to hers. He slid his jeans off, tossed them aside, and he heard a click. It was metallic. Very slowly, he peered around to look behind him, back over by the roamer, standing there, mangled, naked but for a torn tank top. Angelica. She was holding the pistol steady at the hip. Yards away, Guy was standing but a few feet from his jeans, and he could see the pocket with the remote in it. He called out in what he could muster as a calm voice. So, what the hell you doing? Helping. That's supposed to be funny? He wasn't calm now. Huh? The mangled robot only looked at him, face beaten and crooked, gun ready. Guy was getting ready for his jeans, and then he lunged down to them, grabbing for the remote. The loud crash of the pistol. She missed. Awkwardly rearranged the shot. He got the remote, and as soon as his finger could push a random button, bang! Guy's right hip exploded in a spray of deep red. He collapsed. The remote fell, but Angelica could not move. He had pushed observe. Guy started to crawl to Angelica. The tied-up woman now thrashing and screaming insanely. Guy's crawl was weak. He could barely move. But move he did. Just barely. And somehow, Angelica's arm moved slightly. This would be contrary to the remote command, Guy knew. And her arm moved yet again, toward him. Not quite aimed at him, but her frame was giving way and she wasn't able to stand straight. He crawled and screamed in agony. His crawl was slow and only getting slower. Angelica's body finally caved, and she crumbled to a kneeling position, pistol now aimed right at him. She fired. Guy fell back in a huge mist of blood from the chest. He lay there, dead. The woman in the ropes was crying and not struggling. Instead, she was crying joyous, beautiful tears. Slowly, she was wiggling her way out of the wrist ties. The terror of the last hour and a half was beginning to lift, and the day began to turn back on. The woman undid her ankle ties. She stood naked and in awe of her savior, the silicon woman who now knelt motionless on this rainy hill. The woman tried to pick her up, to move her, to embrace her frozen form and give her thanks, but her robotic frame was far too heavy, too broken to do anything with. The crying woman began to move back, not able to look away from Angelica. Thank you, she said through her tears. She could barely speak. This is something that I can never forget. She didn't know what else to say. She leaned down, grabbed a flower that had blown from the tree, ran back over to Angelica, and she tucked the flower behind Angelica's hair and silicon ear. She kissed her broken cheek. Thank you. And then she was gone. Rain came down on the roamer and everything else, and Angelica only knelt there, gun partially drawn, forever locked in her savior's stance. She stayed that way for a very, very long time. The end. The end, everybody. That was Storm of God. Um yeah, let's see who all's still here. Colton, are you still here, or was that a long time ago that he responded? I can't really tell. But we got Paul, we got Dan, we got Daniel, we got Ghost, we got Ratbad. Good stuff. Thanks, Ghost. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Uh Yeah, I was wondering if anyone was able to read along on the page, because it was made to where if you couldn't really if you didn't like how I was reading it, you can kind of read along on the screen. But if you couldn't, then sorry. Uh, you like my writing style? Thank you, thank you, thanks, thanks a lot. Paul says, yeah, definitely. Now, yes, yeah, there's some dragged across concrete in here for sure. Um, there's another story that's a little even more inspired by it, but we're not going to get to that one yet. Um, so yeah, I'm wondering what people thought, what the effect was. That was my not my first short story, but it's the first one that I'm like that I think I can actually truly say that I'm like really proud of. I'm proud of some of the ones that came before them, but they were just practice. We might have lost some people. But hey, it is a live stream, so if we lost anyone, then that means you could just go back and start wherever you left off. Oh, it was spooky and gritty and caught me by surprise a bit. Yeah, it was. I definitely tried to make it gritty and take you by surprise, scene by scene. So, um, yeah. Uh, Storm of God. Um, this is the one that I hopefully can get edited and put into like a magazine or an anthology or something. Who knows? But if you couldn't make it, then please go back to the this will be archived. So go feel free to go back and uh, catch where you left off, and hopefully I will be doing this in the future with more completed works. So thank you everybody for tuning in. It was fun, and I will catch you on the Discord.